What makes a good home? What makes a good home in like the physical space of the home? So the most fundamental value of any kind of comfort or joy in our lives, the highest thing that it can do is point us toward heaven. So the home can direct us like all good things toward this kind of eternal life and what we were actually made for. So if heaven is a place and our home is a place, it seems to make a lot of sense to me that we model our home around heaven. So we're not talking about like a floor plan. You're not literally asking like, are there marble or linoleum countertops in heaven? Should we have a rain shower or a roll? And those things are very specific, but more on like the high level in terms of the things that heaven is and that we can also make our homes. So the three things that I really want to talk about are three on the board: permanence, security, and beauty. So heaven is permanent, it's secure, and it's beautiful. And I think we can agree that it's pretty obvious that heaven is these things. I don't think we have a logical debate on this. It should be fairly straightforward. And I think we can all like find a reference point for this so we can start a conversation about it. So we'll start out with permanence. So heaven is eternal. You don't change addresses every fall when we come back to campus. Like, you don't change roommates. You don't go apartment shopping every year. You don't get new neighbors. Heaven's got a permanence to it. And this is an inherently good thing. It's good for our souls, it's good for our communities, and it's super practical. So permanence is like a very practical part of our lives, and it has some very good practical implications. People are much more open to correction and nurturing and building community in surroundings that they're familiar with. So if you think about the first time you ever came into St. Paul's, or like the first day of a retreat, if you knew almost no one on the retreat, if it's in a place you've never been, you're not really gonna like just kind of kick off your shoes and lay back and like spill your guts to the person sitting next to you. Let's talk about all this deep spiritual stuff. It usually takes a while. But now, at least for me, like I will totally walk up to the red couches upstairs and take my shoes off and lay down on the couches and just take a nap or talk about some deep point of theology with someone. And that comes from consistency, from being in the same place to the point where this is my home now. It's kind of taken some ownership over this. And the other aspect of that is it's much easier to be hospitable, to invite people into a place that's your home. And you feel like it's your home when you've been there for a while. So you can be hospitable, you can build community through this kind of permanence. And just really practically, you have to interact with the same people over time to build a community with them. So one of the really practical ways right now as students that we can do this is not shopping for new roommates every year. I think there's a good analogy here, maybe an extreme analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway, to this kind of the idea of casual sex, that like you have a use and you're fulfilling it, and now you're moving on. Roommates can kind of be the same thing. It's like, I have a lot of fun with you, now you're getting really annoying. Like that laugh that was really great at the bar, I now hear every night, and that's not okay. So we kind of get in this mentality of roommates, we kind of shop around, we can trade out, and we just kind of, and a lot of times you don't even know it. All of a sudden you go, oh yeah, by the way, I'm not going to get a lease next year. And there's this kind of flippant like changing of community. There's extraordinary value to staying with the same people and to staying in the same place and to forming that like real community from one year to the next. And it takes sacrifice, and it's kind of practice for a real home where you can't just shop around for new kids. Sometimes that's what the relationships are like in an apartment setting. It's parent and child. Very much like that in the rectory. Don't dare leave dishes in the sink. We'll curse them for you. Alright, so an atmosphere of permanence can also be established by the things that we have in our home. So rather than going to IKEA every time you move and filling your house with kind of new cheap stuff that gets thrown out and replaced over time and just kind of cycles through, having possessions that are passed on even so far as one generation to the next can establish a value to that continuity, tradition, family, all the value system that goes with that object. Like there are things that are conveyed through our material possessions, and we lose that when we kind of like, well, I'm just going to do my own thing. So be bold in asking for things. Don't be afraid to do that with your grandparents. You'd be shocked at how willing they are to like, yeah, sure. You know, our registry is tiny because my grandparents have so much stuff and forgiveness, and it's beautiful, and it comes with all these stories and memories. So it establishes this feeling of continuity and a value for tradition. Everything in the church is just something impregnated with this meaning. And we can kind of establish that within the home with our own families by using these things that have history. So human beings were created for community and were built on pattern recognition. Like I just came from a lecture on this. I'm a mechanical engineer. This lecture was almost all psychology. I was like a fish out of water, but it was great because I learned a lot. Wow, this is awesome. I now understand how the brains work. So pattern recognition, like dopamine, this stuff comes from experiencing the same thing over and over again. Okay, so we're built this way for community and habit, and we should desire it. There's value to that. One of the first ingredients of the spiritual life. What will any of the priests, your friends, the guys, the men and women who really hang on the same altar, pray at the same time every day, pray in the same place every day. You can do that. It becomes a habit. It becomes a part of your life. So establishing value and consistency is something we can teach by being consistent in the place where we live and the things that we feel are home. So on to security. There's one side of this that I would love to talk about, which is I'm a firm believer in having like 6 months worth of food and fresh water stashed in your basement. The zombies are coming. Like this is the part. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that. But considering most of you now think I'm crazy, I'll just skip that in the actual talk. So let's go a little more high level than boarding up the windows. What makes a place secure? First and foremost, it's that the roof's not caving in. It's the simple things like the pipes and the windows aren't smashed and things like that. And that seems self-evident, but especially in college housing, that's not always true. There are holes missing from windows in more than one place where I've lived. So this is not always true of homes that we'll have as a family either. So don't take for granted that the place is physically sound. But then there's also the aspect of the place feeling secure, and that goes way beyond the fact that it's structurally sound. And I know that all these touchy-feely, this is all very subjective, and I get that. But the reality is that the way we feel about things, the way that we experience things matters. It changes the way we look at the world and what we're willing to receive in that context. So feeling secure is almost as important as actually being safe. So feeling secure can come down to things like the fact that there's not a weed like a sequoia growing in the garden, or there's not a trim missing from the door frame because you started a project and just didn't finish it, and there's not lime scale crawling up inside of the shower. All these things kind of speak of neglect. It's this idea that my home is not really that important. There are things that fall higher on the spectrum of this space. It just doesn't really matter, and it kind of lends itself to a habit of neglect, but also this feeling for other people who enter into your home, especially your own family. And I think a good example of this is, or a good way to understand it, I should say, is that things need to not just function, but they need to function well. We want to do all things with excellence, including our homes. So the example that I think of is a screened-in porch in the backyard that's so overflowing with stuff that you're using it for storage, so that it can't actually be used for community or play or whatever it's meant to be used for. There's kind of this ontological reality, it's a porch, it's supposed to be used as a porch. Have a picnic out there, don't use it for storage. It's all kind of wrapped up in the same idea of neglect. So they should not just function, but function well. And having this kind of secure and tidy home and having everything kind of has a place is a really easy way to teach people their fundamental dignity as a human being. It's something that you internalize without even thinking about it. If you think about a child, before they're old enough to understand self-sacrificial love, okay, dad goes to work, he comes home, there's food on the table, that connection is not made. But children definitely make a connection between their parents and the space they live in. And they know when a place is comfortable and warm and cozy, and they know that they can be comfortable there and they can just be themselves. They understand that and they tie that to their parents. This is teaching love. This is teaching human dignity. And this goes in the same way as kind of the security and the feeling of security. This goes well beyond the bare minimum human dignity. This is not about the fact that there are not rats in your home and that you have a roof over your head and that you're fed. We are all in a position in this culture, in this part of the world, to supply our families with something that calls them to excellence, that acknowledges not just their basic human dignity, but the potential that they have. They have the potential for greatness. And your surroundings can teach you that. The fact that this doesn't just work, this is something beautiful, this is something whole, and I provide this for you. So it speaks to the basic dignity of human beings and also their potential. So I talked a little bit about comfort, And this all kind of ties back to security, but I think comfort kind of gets a bad rap at St. Paul's, or at least it's kind of a dirty word. If you've seen the St. Paul's t-shirts, they literally say, you were not made for comfort, you were made for greatness. It's John Paul II. So now I'm going toe-to-toe with John Paul II. This talk's going to go great. And I agree, I completely agree that we're not made for comfort. Comfort should never take precedence over kind of the highest things that we strive for. But in the same way that like security and consistency help build community, comfort does the same thing. I was given another source for this talk 2 hours ago at this lecture. We were talking about kind of marketing and understanding the way that people make choices. And they cited this study that people who were sitting in a hard, stiff chair negotiated like much more shrewdly and were not willing to give as much in like a monetary negotiation than people who were in like squishy, soft chairs. And if you think about the context of your family, do you want them coming to dinner in the context of like bargaining table, like, oh, I like this used car dealer mentality, right? Like that's not what you want. So the comfort of our home can kind of lead us to be more open to being facilitating community. And if you think even yourself, if you're hungry, how willing are you to have a conversation with a new person? Maybe this is just for guys, I don't know. Not just like hunger starts like takes precedent, and that's just another form of comfort. That's just it all kind of gets wrapped up together. The more comfortable you're more willing to jump in. So your home can be comfortable if you're getting complacent, just take a cold shower, you'll be fine. So there's one other aspect of security, and I'm really kind of hammering on this one, but beyond the physical elements of the home, there's a sense of security in the family that comes from the capableness of the family's parents. So I'm going to come at this from the side of a man, a husband, father. Obviously, this is kind of the viewpoint that I take on this, but it's obviously universally applicable. But for example, my dad loves doing home improvement projects. He loves repairing things on his own. We've never had a contractor in our house, and my dad would tell you that. He's very proud of that. So what's behind this? Is it like this kind of machismo and like the modern incarnation of the John Wayne, the rugged individual? I don't need no contractor in my home. There's probably some of that. It might be more than a little. But I'd like to think there's something virtuous and true behind that desire. And I think where it really comes in is that we have this mentality of, here's a problem, throw money at it until it goes away. And in some areas, that is very logical and good. By all means, throw money at the brain surgeon to fix your brain. But this is one area, this idea of home improvement and maintaining your own home, that is very easy to do yourself and to reestablish this idea that, you know, my family's problems at the end of the day, they're mine. So you can pay a plumber to fix a leak, but it's not the plumber's responsibility to make sure your family has water. That's your responsibility. So, and then there's something, again, this is a little subtle, because if you pay a plumber to fix the water, your family's really just as secure and safe as they would have been if you had done it yourself. But there's something profound about understanding that, both as a child and as an adult, that like, you know, if things really go sideways, I can handle this. I can take care of this. That like I don't have to run for help every time something small goes wrong. So a really practical thing, if you don't know what you're doing, one for things, either ask, consult YouTube, or don't do it. 120 volts goes from your screwdriver to your fingers to your heart really fast, and it's very uncomfortable. I'm speaking from experience. So anytime you're messing with electricity, either really know what you're doing or just call an electrician. Another really good example. Or better yet, call a friend. This is a thing that used to be a reality in communities, like barn raising. Most people have heard that phrase. Like that used to be a common occurrence, that communities would come together when they needed something, or when one person needed something, and they just did it. And they did it themselves, they did it together. And there's something really profound about building something together. That is like irreplaceable. You can't get that kind of community anywhere else. So if you need help, call me. I'll load up my trailer with a bunch of power tools and we'll build a deck in your backyard. It's fun. We usually get paid in beer. And at the end of the day, you've built this community. You've established that we're kind of not in this alone, and that when we need something, we're going to go after it together. So, one last thing on this point with security, and then I'll move on. If it's the vocation of the father to provide security for his family, kind of safety and protection, and the home is kind of the most profound incarnation of this, or one of the most, then it makes sense that he can do those things on his own. And even more so than that, it's really easy in kind of our society, like the way our world works, for men to lose sight of what the role of a father is. And for families in general, but I think even more so for men looking inward at themselves. Because we're looking at protection. Look, you call 911, the fire truck or the ambulance shows up. If you need food, you go to the grocery store. Snow plows take care of your streets. And you know, if you disappear, if you lose your life, if you just, whatever happens, if your family's on their own, the government's going to step in and make sure they don't starve to death. And like healthcare is going to be provided one way or another. This is in no way a criticism of any of those programs. I don't want that to be the case at all. It's all things that we need in our world. But nonetheless, it kind of lessens the immediacy of the role of the father. It's like, what am I doing here? And all of this is taken care of whether I'm here or not. Now, that's not literally true. Like, families definitely still need fathers because there's something profoundly different about that thing being supplied by a father. But this is a way to remind yourself as a man and your family that, like, look, I've got a place here that if you do these projects yourself, there's like a physical reminder, look, like, this is something that I provided for our family out of love for you. So it's kind of this profound act of love, something that sticks around over time as a reminder of that. So finally, let's talk about beauty. We know that heaven will be beautiful, and most of us have experienced kind of a foretaste of this on earth. We look at, like, we've spent a day in the mountains, we've looked at a beautiful piece of art, we've experienced architecture that was really gorgeous. So we know what beauty can do, that it can kind of elevate and lift our spirits. John Paul II wrote in his letter to artists, beauty is a key to the mystery and a call to transcendence. It is an invitation to savor life and to dream of the future. That is why the beauty of created things can never fully satisfy, but it stirs in this hidden nostalgia for God. This is how powerful it is. Like those words could be about, almost be about the Eucharist. Like this is a big deal in the Catholic Church. That's not strictly speaking true. The Eucharist will actually do all these things, but we will almost do these things. Wouldn't want to preach heresy, especially now that I realize I'm on the new camera. So beauty is extremely important. This is a big deal. And the home is the space that our families spend the most time in. So why should this not just be a work of art all its own? Isn't that even terribly difficult to do? So you can create something uniquely beautiful about your home. And I can tell you how to decorate your house or your apartment. That's definitely not my place. But I'll give you 2 points kind of from my experience and from my family that have made a big difference in my mind in kind of the beauty of our home. The first one is don't be afraid of real art. So we know instinctively the difference between a work of art and something that fills an awkward space on the wall. So there's a decoration and then there's art. And art is something that actually elevates our spirits, that gives us something truly profoundly beautiful in our space. So Pope Benedict wrote about this. He said that too often the beauty that is thrust upon us is illusory and deceitful, superficial and blinding, leaving the onlooker dazed instead of bringing him out of himself and opening him up to horizons of true freedom as it draws him aloft. It imprisons him within himself and further enslaves him, depriving him of hope and joy. Wow. That's for real. he kind of, in fact, I mean, read this, I'm like, whoa, does it really do all that? So, but the more I thought about it, the more I think that may very well be true, because we can find a kind of beauty in like an advertisement. And in fact, you can describe an advertisement as beautiful insofar as like it's ordered, it's got the right shape and size. You can like kind of apply Aquinas' characteristics for beauty to it. You can do that, but that doesn't mean that it pulls you out of yourself and brings you higher to something beautiful. So I have an example, and I want your input. I'm not hiding my face. Somebody shout out, what's the first thing you think of when you see this?
Ugly.
What was that?
Ugly.
Ugly?
Family.
Somebody else. Someone's back me up here. I think it's beautiful.
I think family.
Family.
Right.
Thank you.
It's warm.
It's warm.
Brains are pretty.
Actually, that's a good point. I'm going to come back to that. You actually put out something really important. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Skill.
What's that? Skill. Yeah. No, This is something that took tremendous time. You can see that this is Da Vinci, by the way. Oh, and I'm so sorry, I completely forgot to introduce this. So this is Elizabeth and Mary and St. John the Baptist and Jesus. It's one of my favorite works of art. It happens to be on Father Mark's wall normally. Right now it's in my hands. The things that I think about, and granted I gave myself more than 3 seconds to think about these things, but the way that this led me, I stopped and thought about it for just like a minute. And the things I thought of were, wow, Jesus was a real man. He had intimate moments with his mother and his aunt. That's like the most profound moment in human history right there, that God became man. And that was just conveyed through art in a way that I now understand better. That is like one of the ultimate examples of being pulled outside yourself into like the great mystery that is Christianity, that is our church. So that's what that did for me after me thinking about it for like 1 minute. If that's hanging on your wall and you walk past it every day, and some days you won't even notice it, but then the one time when you stop and look, imagine what you can get out of something like that. And this is a reproduction, it's not $1 million work of art. The frame is also very beautiful. So I have another example to contrast this with, and I'm so sad that Rosie's not here, because this was mostly... Thank you for taking that down. So based on the tone of my talk, take a guess at where this was earlier today. Luke Kirsten's wall. So now I'm going to criticize his choice of art too. So, first thing you think of when you see this? Yeah. Overrated. Tough.
I think Royals.
Go Cubs.
Thank you. So, I mean, you kind of get where I'm going with this, that there's a difference. And then again, same deal. Not a criticism of either the Cardinals or of Luke for hanging inside his wall. There is a place for this. Personally, I think this goes above the home bar or in the garage. I think those are good places for this. But my point is that, look, this thing, in a minute of looking at this image, what I pulled out of it was one of the most profound teachings of the Catholic Church and one of the greatest moments of human history. At the very best, I think what you get from something like a sports poster is a reminder of a really great moment in your life. That's important, but it's not the same as beauty. And surrounding yourself with beauty is going to do so much more for your soul than just a reminder of a good time that you had in the past. There's a place for that. Find a place for it in your home. But I think there's something profoundly missing if all your home is filled with is kind of these memories that don't really lend themselves to true beauty. So, wow, that was way too long, because that was point 1. Do you remember what I started talking about? Okay, I should have practiced this. So the second thing is, so the first thing was don't be afraid of real art. The second thing is try to make sure that there's a continuity to your home. So then this is just about thinking for a split second about, does this forest green couch go with the baby pink wallpaper in this room? No. So this can make a big difference for the overall feel of a home, and the fact that, like, wow, like this was constructed with some thought. I didn't just throw things up and pick up random pieces here and there. And also, like, I realized that in all reality, this is what my home is like right now. There's kind of bits and pieces. I'm moving over the time. They don't have a permanent place. But if you have some kind of semi-permanence, this is really not terribly difficult to do, to think about the way your space comes together. This kind of comes back to Aquinas talking about what is beauty. It's ordered. It has a clarity and like a direction to it. And having things that all fit together really lends itself to that. So try to make sure things fit. The second part of that is this idea of sacramentality. So, practical example, there are lots of animals in my basement. They're dead and they hang on the walls. I'm from northern Wisconsin. So we have deer and fish and stuff on the walls in our basement. So taxidermy, all right? So I think they're beautiful. Mostly they're probably just like I said, a reminder of a great time. I think there's some artistry to it. The point is they're in the basement, in like the rec room. They're not in the dining room. And the dining room is this beautiful oil painting of this white church that's kind of tucked back into a stand of fall trees. And it just says something completely different. It lends a completely different feel to the room. So there's this idea in the Catholic Church of sacramentality that sacramentality is an outward expression. There's an outward expression of an inward reality or a spiritual reality. And the fact that things have an oddness. in that they ought to be one place and not another, or they ought to be used one way and not another. And that actually matters. It makes a difference to our souls. It makes a difference to the way we live our lives. Obviously, we can see this the best in the sacraments themselves, where like, we have the sign of bread and wine. In reality, this is the body and blood of Jesus Christ. But in kind of a more physical example, or the more immediate example, is that you don't wear the same thing to class that you're going to wear on your wedding day. That you put on something appropriate to the situation because it reflects like kind of the intensity that you go into something with. Is it joy? Is it sorrow? Whatever it is, it's an accurate reflection of what's going on internally. You do the same thing with our homes. All right. What time is it? Oh.
You're good.
All right. So, I'm going to cut some things out here because this is always happens when he talks. Just decide that one thing's more interesting than another. So, all right. So, detachment. Detachment kind of goes along with this conversation about comfort, that we want to live lives where we're not, I don't know how to define this without using the word attachment. We're not attached to things being a particular way. We can find joy. It's okay when the plan changes. We're living for heaven, not for here, so when things go wrong, it's all right. It is okay to be attached to the way your home looks and the way that it functions. In fact, I would say you're doing a disservice to your call as a human being if you're not particular about the way you construct your surroundings. Because we have this call to kind of steward creation, but also to perfect it, to beautify it. That's why we create works of art, so we build beautiful buildings. And it's a universal call. It's not just for artists and architects. So if our job is to create something beautiful, and the things we own are the kind of property that we have control of, we have the most direct control over it, it ought to be beautiful, and we ought to take ownership over that beauty, not kind of just go with the flow, but be particular about the way our homes look and function. And look, in the end, this stuff's all functional. So whatever works for your family. I mean, there are objective ideas of art, like things are ordered and they're sacramental, but only you know what your family really needs. Be particular about creating your home in such a way that it facilitates what they need. All right, so the difference between luxury and quality. And this also goes along with detachment. This idea that we don't need expensive things. We can just go whatever works. Yes, true. We don't need expensive things, but there's a difference between a desire for luxury and a desire to have quality things in our home. And this kind of, you can visualize this really easily. Think about like a latex painted white shelf that's made of particle board that's full of books. And then imagine a handmade solid oak bookshelf. There's a difference there. There's a difference when you walk into a room, the way that it makes you feel, and the way maybe that makes you consider what's inside that shelf. If you have this great collection of literature, and does it deserve to be surrounded by something beautiful? And I know that sounds kind of silly, like, does my book deserve to be surrounded with something beautiful? I mean, not really, but the fact is that it makes you think about it in a different way. Like, you don't just kind of you don't toss it on the floor if you have something important to you. And the kind of the trappings of our life really influence the way we look at the world. So it works both ways. The way we look at the world should influence our environment, but it works backwards too. It changes the way we think about things. It's in the way that we construct the choices that we make. All right, I promise this is actually the last thing. I want to go back to kind of this do-it-yourself thing, because I'm really big on that. Obviously, my family's really big on that. But I think there's a hidden value to it that comes in the form of beauty, and that sometimes the only way you can afford to have something that's quality and beautiful is to do it yourself. The perfect example of this in my family, we wanted to put up a storage shed in our backyard. The Home Depot snap-together plastic things are ugly, and they don't last. But like to pay someone to come in and put up a small building on your property is very, very expensive. So what we did is, hey, Uncle Chris, Uncle Jim, hey Dustin, hey Trevor, all my cousins, my uncles came over. We got a mixed cement mixer. We moved the cement into the backyard with wheelbarrows. We spent all day pouring foundation. We put up walls, we put up rafters, put a roof on the windows, window boxes, put mom's potty bench and an awning. And now we've got this beautiful shed that looks the same today as the day we built it 15 years ago. And the cedar siding matches the house. There's flowers in the window boxes, and this is something that now serves our family and that we built as a community. And there's something really, really valuable in understanding how difficult it is to create something of quality and beauty. And the fact that the idea, this doesn't just fall from the sky. You can't take beauty for granted when you know how difficult it is to create, that these things don't just pop up. That beauty is willed into existence by people who value it, people who understand how important beauty and quality are. All right. As Catholics, we believe that God became man, and because of that, the stuff of the world matters. He brought that divinity down into our reality. And if our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, then we can think about our homes as like the outer courtyard of that temple. And we can construct that courtyard in such a way that it gives the same glory to God as a beautiful church, as our bodies. So establishing these things in the home, establishing the permanent security and beauty, I think we can all agree on some level or another, to kind of directs us toward this end. And the hope is that then the home just becomes a backdrop for the life of a saint, and ultimately that's kind of